Okay. So we're on 26. So let's cruise through the rest of this, and then we'll get into our other conversations for the evening. So we're back into the anatomy of a seller transaction, and on 26, we have, once you sign the contract and agree to all inspection items and a mortgage and everything is all kind of going, you fall into a spot typically in a transaction, especially as the listing agent, where there's not a ton of stuff that has to get done every day, right? There's that little bit of a lull, like everything was hot and heavy, and now all that stuff is kind of either in process or done, and there's not a ton for you to do each day. I can tell you that the temptation is to allow that lull period to not have you be communicating at a high level with the seller, right? It feels like, finally we're to this point where now I can take a break. And what I have found is that if you decide to take a break from communication during that period and only show back up again the week of the closing, do you remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about commission breath and how gross commission breath is, right? When it seems to the client like the only reason you're in touch with them is because now it's time to get paid. Well, one of the ways that you solve that issue on the list side is you have a plan for that period of time. It's like a 30-day period sometimes where there's not a ton that's happening on a daily basis. And my advice to you is every 2 to 3 days, again, put a system in place that every 2 to 3 days, you have some kind of outbound conversation with the seller. Right, and I'll give you some ideas about what that looks like in a second. Number 27, keep the MCA in the loop as dates for the closing may change. Right, remember that we do have to invoice for our services. That typically happens automatically. But if the dates change and the MCAs don't know if the dates have changed, well, now you have an issue in that if the closing date has been moved up, the attorneys may not have an invoice for our services because you didn't let the MCAs know that the closing had gotten moved up, so they hadn't taken action on sending that invoice out. So do make sure that you keep them in the loop as soon as you know that a closing date has changed, either being moved up or being pushed back. Right, and so once you do have that closing date firm, mark that on your calendar, let everybody know just in case anybody else is not in the clear. And so here's that list. 29 is that list of things that you can look at as opportunities to stay in touch with the seller during that kind of 30-day lull period, right? So you can make a call to remind them that they need to call the utilities and give a not necessarily a termination notice, but an order of transfer, right? That things are going to go out of their name at a certain date and the new people are going to call and take the utilities in their name at a certain date. You could call and to remind them to arrange for an oil tank reading, right? What does that mean? Why does someone have to come and read the oil tank for a closing?
Because whatever is left over is credited to the seller. Sorry, yes.
Anyone? Bueller?
Hello?
No?
Someone's answering, Rick. You can't.
Yeah,
hear.
did you not hear her?
I can hear her.
I don't think
For
he
some
can.
reason, I'm not hearing you. You know what? I think maybe it's me. Hold on. Oh, look at that. It was me. I had turned my speaker off. Here I'm thinking it's you all. Nope, it was me. So let me ask that again. Why on earth would someone have to call to have an oil tank read prior to a closing on the seller side?
Because whatever is left over in the tank is credited to the seller at closing.
That's exactly right. And Barbara, I think everybody else heard you say that the first 3 times you said it. I'm the only one who didn't hear it. So thank you for repeating it. I appreciate it. So yeah, remember they apportion oil at the closing. So the buyer is going to buy whatever oil is in the tank. And so therefore you need to have the oil company come out and stick the tank. Interesting, I had an issue about a month ago where someone called me and said, my sellers just called the oil company and said they needed to have the oil tank read. Who's on the call right now? So Dee and Nellie, Donna, tell me if you've heard this before, because this was news to me. The oil company came back and said, so if you're going to ask us to come out and stick the tank, we're either going to charge you $95 for that, or you have to fill out this document and give us the buyer's name, the buyer's contact information, all the closing information, when it's happening, all that stuff, or we're going to charge you. Have you guys run into that before?
I did.
Well,
It happened to me on my last transaction.
see, that's crazy. So just understand from me to you, the agent called me and said, what should I do? And I said, you can't really do anything. If I would advise the seller to call her oil company and say, I beg your pardon. Why on earth do you expect me to give you confidential information about the buyers of my property clearly so you can attempt to solicit them? Or you're going to punish me by charging me to come out for a visit. If you can show me in your contract that it says that I have to pay for this visit, or then fine.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
This was a COD, so cash on deal, on delivery. So there was no contract involved. So probably that's why. If there's no contract, they will charge you to come and read.
Yeah, I still think it's kind of BS, because what they're really trying to do is make sure that they don't lose the house, right, as a customer. It's an interesting play, right? But it kind of annoyed me that the seller was being put in a position to either have to give out confidential information or not. I don't know how it came out, but I told them go back and fight. Or just pay it, one of the two, right? You get to make a choice. So just know stuff like that sometimes comes up. I had literally never heard it before in 21 years. That was the first time I had ever heard someone charging for an oil reading. A little bit of bribery going on there, I think. But all right. So also on that list of things that you can be contacting the seller about to fill in that gap, that 30-day gap or so, make sure that they've spoken to their attorney about anything else that might need apportioning, right? So they apportion oil at the closing. Sometimes if they're on like private water and there's been a prepay for some water, sometimes they'll apportion water at the closing, right? So those are just things you need to be discussing with the seller and the attorney to make sure that everybody's I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Make sure that the sellers have taken care of their change of address online with the U.S. Postal Service. Make sure that you remind them they're going to have to change the address on their license. I think in our state you have 30 or 90 days, something like that, to officially change your license before you're in some sort of violation. I always find that whenever I mention that in this class, someone on the call is like, oh, I moved like 3 years ago and I still have the old address on my license. I get it. I think officially you have 90 days to get that changed. So do just as another point of reference, another point of conversation with the seller, so that every 2 to 3 days you're saying, hey, just wanted to remind you about this. Hey, how are things going? Hey, just wanted to remind you about that, right? Always coming from contribution, but staying in touch and keeping those lines of communication open. Remind them to gather all keys for the house for the closing. Remind them to gather any warranties or manuals they have for anything. Kind of stick them in a drawer or on a counter so that everything is there. Remind them as it gets closer and closer to closing of the things they said they would leave, right? Especially if they're not necessarily regular things. If they're leaving an appliance that might normally go with the sellers, remind them that their contract says like that second fridge downstairs is supposed to stay, right? Please don't have them move the playset outside because that's supposed to stay. These are all just things that if you'll create a system out of this and have either this checklist or pop that checklist in Command, right? Make a smart plan for yourself in Command around it, that you don't have to worry about stuff that sometimes pops up at the closing, right? Because how many of us have actually gotten to a house or gotten to a closing and found that the sellers took half the stuff they were supposed to leave, right? And now you're having an argument over silly stuff, So it just saves all of that if you will proactively, as the listing agent, keep reminding people about what they need to be doing. Number 30 is just more of the same. 31. 31, I kind of like a lot. We still do it for our seller clients. And it's find out when their moving day is, or minimally when packing day is, like when everyone's going to be there, if it's them or if it's them and professional movers, and send lunch. Send lunch. It just kind of hits home for people, especially if they're in the middle of packing and there's no food in the house. They can't find a fork, right? They're eating off of cardboard box tops, and so it's just kind of nice to send over. You know, send some pizza and some salad over. Send a hero over from a deli. What we do is we take an order the week before when we find out what day they're actually moving. We just take an order and say, here are your 3 options, right? You can have a hero, you can have pizza and salad, or you can have, I don't know, whatever else. And then we send it over, and we always ask how many people will be there and to include the movers. Including the movers is a smart move simply because, I don't know about the rest of you, if you've ever paid professional movers to move you. At 11:59, it doesn't matter what else is going on. They stop for lunch and they get in that truck and they drive away. Doesn't matter what's on the lawn, what the ominous clouds approaching look like, right? That was my experience. My couch, everything that would be damaged in the rain was on my front lawn. It was 11:59. They're all getting in the truck. I'm like, well, where are you going? Well, we have to go get lunch. Like, okay, but do you see the storm that's approaching? Could we maybe put this stuff in the truck before you go to lunch? So when you bring in lunch and you include the movers, it just keeps everybody on the property, keeps everybody happy. And remember, your whole job in that moment is to keep everybody as stress-free as possible on one of the highest stress days of their world, right? Moving days, that's that high stress day when everything is being wrapped and put onto a truck. So 32, remove the lockbox from the house, order the sign down, take up all of your marketing materials, right? So you want to make sure that the house is cleared to close with all of your stuff gone. Make sure that the sellers know when the buyer's agent will do the walkthrough, right? And the other part of the walkthrough is if you've taken the lockbox off, who has the key to the house? You do, right? And so if you take the lockbox off on Tuesday and the walkthrough's on Thursday, you need to make sure that you've communicated that to the buyer's agent so that the buyer's agent doesn't get there and have a problem with no key. I will tell you, one time I had a closing on the ass end of Monroe. You know where the ass end of Monroe is? Like there's the close end of Monroe, and then there's the ass end of Monroe. And so the ass end of Monroe is where I happened to sell a house. And so I drove from Ridgefield up to Danbury to pick up the clients. And we drove in one car from Danbury all the way to the ass end of Monroe, only to get there and find out that the listing agent had taken the lockbox off. And so there was no key. It was also late in the day on a weekday after 5 o'clock. And this was like a small little brokerage. It was, 2 people in the brokerage. It wasn't like there was a whole big staff there. Couldn't get anybody on the phone. Luckily, my skills don't end with real estate. I'm not saying exactly what skills those are. Suffice it to say, however, we got in the house. Luckily, the guy I was selling the house to was a whole lot bigger than me. And we found a window in the back that we could kind of shimmy open. And he just pushed me through it. I got to be pushed through it because I was smaller. So I got to go head first into the laundry room, and we got in the house. So no pit bulls, which was awesome. They were already out. So there was no issue there, no alarm. But my point is, had I not been able to get in the house through opening a window, we were all the way in Monroe. The listing agency was back in Danbury, where we came from, right? So you've got to make sure that all that's coordinated so you don't have unhappy buyers and unhappy buyers agents. Number 34 dates us, right? It dates this document. It's time for an upgrade, right? Because for the most part, most people are not attending closings any longer, right? Closings are oftentimes, especially in the last 6 months, a lot of closings are just done online. I just had a closing that I did last week that was done online, right? So in lieu of going to the closing, make sure that you are in conversation with the sellers, right? If the closing is at 3 o'clock on Wednesday, be on the phone with them a couple of times before that. Make sure they know that your phone is available to ring at any moment during the course of that closing period when they're with their attorney. You can certainly go and sit with them at the attorney's office. I will tell you that some attorneys are going to ask you not to, because that's just one more person in the room nowadays, right? And for the most part, what I find is that the good old days of all of us sitting in one room, holding hands, singing Kumbaya around the closing campfire, right? Just doesn't happen anymore, right? Sellers meet with their attorney, sign some documents. The buyers meet with their attorney separately a day or two later. They sign documents. It's not an event any longer. However, part of the reason that you want to be in communication with your seller at the time of the closing is because that's when the job is done, right? And so you want to be certain that you're around for the testimonial or the review portion of the program to make sure that their happiness with the fact that the job is done gets memorialized for you so you can utilize it to market for additional business, right? And so what I want you to write in here is, in 34, is not just a testimonial, but some version of an online review, right? That's the other piece of this that dates this document. I promise, for those of you who are going to come back to Ignite again, I promise to update this document prior to that airing of our seller unit in the next Ignite. How are you gathering? Why would you gather a testimonial? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, two reasons. One is you want to know how you did, what they thought your work. And the other is to advertise it if you can, or at least let people know how they felt about your work, especially if it was good.
Yeah, indeed, right? And so Barbara's exactly right. You want to use it for marketing purposes to attract more business. And don't forget, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And so without asking for feedback, without asking for a testimonial, you don't really know how someone thinks you did. You might think you did brilliantly. I would like to hear that from the client themselves, right? Now, you can do that by having a form, right? Or an online form. I know some agents who utilize an online service for that, where immediately after the closing, the document, online survey goes to the client. I know some agents who use a paper form for that, and it gets mailed to the client and with an envelope to get mailed back. I'm certain if you looked hard enough, there's an app for that. I can't tell you what it's called, but I'm certain there's an app for feedback, right, that you could employ. And of course, have a system for sending people to reviews. That's really, really important, right? Where are you sending them for reviews? What sites are important for reviews?
Zillow, Google, Facebook.
Yes, yes, yes. Any other ones that you can think of?
Your website.
Realtor.com.
Home Advisor.
Yeah, so Home Advisor, Realtor.com, your own personal website, right? All those places, all those places. So make sure that you have a system in place to help people easily create feedback for you, create a testimonial, give you some of that feedback.
Rick, can I ask you a question related to that?
Yes, ma'am.
So there's so many different places, as you pointed out, where you can get reviews. So short of going, can you do it on Zillow and can you do it on Realtor and can you do it over here? Like, is there any priority that you think it would be best if you could only send, I mean, they're not going to do it in 6 places, you know?
Yeah, agreed. If it were me, I would choose one of them. I hate to say the Z word, but I think that probably that's the best place to consolidate, right? Is
Yeah.
on Zillow. I think more people are going to see it on Zillow
Mhm.
than on any place else. So if you're looking to consolidate, which I think is a good idea, consolidate on Zillow and then push them there.
And I
Right.
would go for Google as well.
Or Google as well, right?
Rick, if they give you a review, if they write it out, I can put it on there myself, correct? Or not?
Well, on some of those sites, you can't put it on. You can't put it on the behalf of somebody else, right? You can lift what they write. If they write a review, you can lift it and then put it into your marketing materials. But you personally can't go ahead and place it on another site. I mean, I guess if you lied about who you were.
Rick, you can't. You really can't. Because when I sold a house to my ex-husband, they even flagged the whole Brayton thing. It became, but he ended up, he could eventually using his work account. So they're really careful.
Yeah. So consolidation on one site is probably the best path then.
Yeah, and then you can copy it and put it on your testimonials or something like that. But
Yeah.
Zillow is really strict.
Yeah, as well they should be, right? Or else we'd all be like writing our own stuff and getting it out there. So, so the point here is, I know a bunch of agents who minimally a couple times a month get come list me calls simply because of their reviews on Zillow. So if you really consolidate and push every single person that you work with to offer you a review, you start to rank differently. Now, of course, you have to perform well, because if they offer you crappy reviews, you're not going to rank all that well, right? So reviews have become really important in terms of additional means of getting more business from the closings that you have. Number 35, report the property is sold in the MLS within 48 hours of the closing. And then here's the system for follow-up, right? We talked about this a little bit when we talked about orphans. We're going to talk about orphans just a smidge more right now. But the system for follow-up with your closed sellers is you have the closing on Wednesday. Within 24 hours, just call them. Just to check in, just to see how they're doing, just to see what the story is, right? So be careful that you don't let that pass. What's the importance of 24 hours after the close?
It's still fresh.
Yeah, they still remember your name, right? So when you call 24 hours later, you're still the realtor who just did all that awesome work, right? Because they just finished. Here's what I learned. Even if you have a stressful transaction, the closing is the happy moment that all that's over. So everyone gets to be happy at the closing. So prolong that happiness feeling as much as you possibly can. Again, give them a call the next day just to check in, just to see how it's going. You can add some humor in there, right? Maybe I'm going to call Donna and say, hey, it's Rick. I know we just closed yesterday, but I miss you already. How's it going? Right? Maybe Donna's driving out to Arizona. Where'd you get? Indiana? Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. How long till you get out of there? Anyone from Indiana? I'm ragging on Indiana. No? Okay, good. I've never been to Indiana, so I just picked a state in between.
I am.
In between. Are you really?
Yes.
Well, everyone,
Liberty, Indiana.
everyone I know from Indiana is lovely.
Yes, they're very nice.
That's the part I just didn't get out. You cut me off, Valerie, before I could say that part. All right. Then within 1 week, you follow up again. So 24 hours, then 1 week, and then 30 days. So in the first 30 days, I want you to call and just follow up and see how things are going, check in, thank them for their business, show some gratitude at least 3 times. If you're a closing gift person, somewhere in that first week, if you haven't given a closing gift at the actual closing, or you didn't see them before they departed, or you didn't sell them another house locally, right? You can send that gift. But if you're a closing gift person, that week of the closing to the few days after is when all that happens. And then of course you place that seller on a post-close follow-up system, right? Whether they've moved locally or far away, you still want them on a post-close follow-up system, right? Why would you want to put sellers who just moved, like Donna moved to Phoenix? Why would we want her on a post-close follow-up system?
Because she still has friends in the area.
Yeah, exactly right, right? She lived here for 32 years, or she lived here for 3.2 years. It doesn't matter how long she was here. She knows somebody here. She had neighbors, she had friends, she frequented certain businesses, right? And so we want to make sure that we keep that relationship alive for the fact that Donna may have additional referrals. Maybe Donna's leaving family here. Maybe she's not going to family, maybe she's leaving family. And so if she had a good experience and we keep in touch, the next time family members locally need real estate services, she may look to refer us to them as well, right? So lots of different reasons. It's a big mistake people make is they think that when people move out of the area, they come out of the database. For me personally, they're just part of the 33 touch, right? After the closing, I don't take them off the 33 touch. By the way, if they were on my 33 touch because they were in my database and they called and said, I want to list my house, well, they list the house. I don't take them off that. They just keep getting my stuff. And then they've moved to Arizona and they keep getting my stuff, right? The phone call that I might make quarterly might be a little different. I'm not going to call and remind Donna that the Thanksgiving parade is next, Thursday morning, because she's not flying from Phoenix back to Stamford to experience the parade, right? And so again, the content of the phone call may be a little different. And frankly, I think they're actually easier to make, right? Because once Donna's in a different state, every time I call and say, hey, how's it going? Brand new state, how are you enjoying it? She can rub in my face that it's 97 degrees and I'm, sitting here in 3 feet of snow. Get the point? See how it works? Let's talk quickly about, and so there is your anatomy of a seller transaction. From the minute you get notified of an offer coming in to the 30 days or so after the closing and everything in between. Any questions, comments, concerns, things that we left out, things that you're concerned about or have questions on? No? Okay. I didn't turn my speaker off again, right? That's really a no. Okay, good. So let's just talk. I want to just revisit orphans before we move off of this document real quick. Remind me from our conversation of a week and a half ago what orphans are.
People who buy your listings.
They are the buyers of your listings. That's exactly right. And so why do we call them orphans? Why don't we just call them buyers of our listings?
Because they're not represented once it's closed.
Yeah, they're not represented once they're closed. And what do we know about 80 to 90% of agents in our industry?
They don't stay in touch.
They're terrible at staying in touch. Terrible. Right? There's like a 90-10 rule that exists in our industry. It's probably more like 80-20 in our organization, just because we push communication and push loyalty programs like the 36 touch so much, but it's still only an 80-20 inside of our organization. That means 80% of you on the call aren't going to stay in touch with clients the way you need to make sure that you're gathering enough relationship points to earn referrals. So just remember that, right? You've got to put systems in place. If you think you're going to remember, this is one of those conversations again where when you've had a closing or 2 closings, it's easy to remember calling those people. When you've had 22 closings or 32 closings or 52 closings, scale makes working out of your head nearly impossible, right? So you need to now utilize systems to make sure that those things get done. So the reason we're talking about orphans again, which again are the buyers of your listings, once it's closed, I encourage you to use this system of communication that's outlined for you here for your own clients, which is a call within 24 hours, another call within the first week, and a third call within the first 30 days, plus a closing gift as your orphan program. Think about what that looks like, right? If I sell Effie a house and 24 hours later, as the listing agent, I'm giving her a call saying, hey, Effie, it's Rick Scott with Keller Williams Realty. I'm not sure that you and I actually ever face-to-face met, but I was the agent who represented the Joneses on the other side of the transaction. I'm just calling in to check in today and see how things are going with your move into the house. Right? And so now if I make that phone call within 24 hours and Effie's agent, Tom Smith, hasn't, what message does that send immediately?
You care?
I care, he doesn't. Step aside, Tom. I'm moving on in. And then within the first 7 days, I'm going to have another call. I may then deliver or send a closing gift as a thank you, right? And then within the first 7 days, my orphan program is 24 hours, then the closing gift arrives. Then that 7-day check-in is a call to make sure they received the closing gift. And now I get to have a little conversation with Effie, who the first time was like, yeah, okay, whatever, whoever you are, everything's great. Thank you for your call. I appreciate it. But now I sent her a present. And so the next time I call, minimally, she's going to say, you know, thank you so much for that gift. That was, my goodness, that was like above and beyond. That was like, wow, thank you so much. Oh, it's my pleasure. I wanted to express my gratitude. You know, if you hadn't purchased the house, the Joneses wouldn't be safely in Arizona. And, you know, my job was to help them get safely to Arizona. So, you know, I'm just so grateful that you decided to buy the house. Hey, while I have you on the phone, anything I can do to help? Or do you need any vendors, or do you have any questions about the property? Anything I could ask the Joneses about on your behalf? I'm happy to facilitate that conversation or put you in touch with them. Right? It's just a simple check-in. I'm not calling like with a fishing hook to hook Effie in the on the hook. I'm just calling to be a human and be a nice guy. By the way, after that first week, now Effie goes on my 36 touch program. So she starts to get my stuff. And then 3 weeks later, when I make another phone call, she's now gotten 2 or 3 things from me because she's on my 36 touch program. That's after the first 2 phone calls and the closing gift. By day 30, Effie thinks I sold her house. She's like, Tom, Jim, Marty, Mark, some guy sold me. No, you know what? It's just Rick Scott. I've now replaced her agent in terms of mind share, because I'm the one who's calling and offering assistance and being grateful. I'm going to tell you guys, it works like a charm. You want to turn every single one of your listings into at least another opportunity for you, even if it's not immediate. I used that system to list properties that I sold. Let me restate that. I used that system to list properties that I didn't sell. That's what I meant to say, right? Buyers of my listings that then came back to me 3 years later because I just adopted them. They needed a realtor. I just adopted them, and it wasn't like it was a fight. It wasn't like there was competition. Hi, Rick. Hi. Can you come list the house? Sure. Right? It works. Trust me when I tell you it works. Comments, questions, concerns about that?
I want to echo the sentiment that orphan program really does work, because a little story about how I got connected to Keller Williams. I used Jody Boxer and her group when I wanted to sell an investment property 5 years ago. And I needed a recommendation. And the person who recommended her to me was someone who bought her listing, who must have been on this orphan program. I said, can you recommend someone? He's like, yeah, she wasn't my agent, but I bought the house from her. And then fast forward to today.
Yeah, so there's a twofer, right? Because not only did Jody's orphan program produce Effie as a listing client, right, via referral, now Effie's a part of our business family, right? That's awesome. That's a great story. I think I'm going to replace all my other stories with that one because I like that one better, right? Because you never know where that's going to go. And if you heard Effie tell her story, Jody didn't sell her house. Jody wasn't involved. She got Jody via referral from somebody who also didn't use Jody to buy the house, right? Jody was on the other side. So thank you for that, because that is a great testimonial for the exact program we're talking about. Here's what I can tell you. It's a little frustrating for me. Most of our agents, right, 510 of you, most of you do not strategically work a consistent orphan program. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why. So what I would say to you is, you want a leg up, whether you've been in the business for 27 minutes or 27 years, if you want a leg up on the competition, implement a program like this, right? Implement a program like this. I sometimes have arguments with people who offer that it's mean and nasty, right? It's how could you do that to the other agent, right? And I want to say this so that you hear it, not from like a mercenary perspective, but just from a simple business and being human perspective. My first goal is to come from contribution, right? We've been talking about that for 3.5 weeks. My first goal is to make sure that I am grateful for the people who bought my listing, because I am, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have sold my property. My clients wouldn't be happy with my services because they didn't come to the table and bring the money, right? The buyers are the ones who bring the money and make the whole thing happen. So I'm coming at this from being grateful. Strategically, it also happens to be true that when you call 3 times in 3 weeks and send a little 3 times in 4 weeks and send a closing gift, you've captured mind share because your competitors aren't doing it. It has nothing to do with being a mercenary. It has nothing to do with being mean to other agents, right? When you're making phone calls, when I call Effie on that 24 hours or that 7 days, I'm not saying bad things about the agent who actually sold her the house. If she brings him up, the only thing I would ever say is, oh, I love Tom. I love him. What a great guy. And then I'll ask another question and we'll have a different conversation. Right? I'm never going to bash anybody. But the simple reality is that there are opportunities out there that are right there in front of you. So I wholeheartedly encourage you, because again, this is one of those arenas, just like calling expireds, either old or current, that seems like everybody does it, that I can tell you the reality is almost nobody does. The orphan program is massively underutilized. So make that one of your things and just make sure that you're consistent with it. Questions, comments, concerns about the orphan program? Hey, let me ask you this question. It's not a trick question. What do you have to do first in order to implement a valid orphan program?
Sell a listing.
You have to actually take listings and sell them. You got it, right? A bunch of you were mouthing it. I saw it. You actually have to take listings. So we're right back to like, what's the very first thing I need to do when I get up every day? Is you need to ask yourself this question. You should write this down. Every single day that you work as a real estate professional, you need to get up and ask yourself one question. And that question is, what am I going to list today? What am I going to list today? Because everything comes from that. Absolutely everything, right? Can't have an orphan program if you're not listing property. All righty, what time is it? 4:48. Okay. Questions? Anything else seller-wise that you want to make sure that we cover before we move from sellers? No, everyone's good? Everyone's an expert? I have a test. I created a poll in Zoom that's really more like a test on all things sellers. Should we take it? No, I'm kidding. I didn't do that. But you all were such smarty pants that you had no questions. So I figured, although now that I say that out loud, it's probably not a bad idea. That could be fun. Maybe I'll work on that and we'll do it on Friday.
Let's do it.
All righty. Lisa says, let's do it. There's always one in the class, right? Teacher, can we please have a test? Please. We've now found her. All right. So with that, what I'd like to do is take a massive pivot away from sellers that we've spent a week and a half on to buyers. Would that be all right? Good. Talk to me a little bit about the benefits and challenges of working with buyers versus being a listing agent. How is it different? What are the benefits? What are the challenges? Let's just make a
Buyers
little.
are very time consuming, much more time consuming.
Yeah, that's definitely true, Lisa, right? Buyers are way more time consuming. Now, one of the things that we're going to assist you with in the next couple of days as we go through this buyer unit is to help you help buyers be less time consuming, right? Because one of the things that I have learned in my career is that the better we are up front with consultation and expectation setting, the less often we have to deal with the time consumingness of buyers, right? Buyers can buy after 2 or 3 times out, right? 8 to 12 homes. One of my scripts with buyers before we headed out the first time was always, so Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I am so excited to get started. Just so you have an understanding of what this typically looks like, most of my clients find the house they purchase within the first 8 to 12 that we see. What do you think of that as a script?
I love it. You're kind of
Yeah, good.
Set expectations.
Yeah, it's just all about setting that expectation, right? Instead of, and trust me when I tell you I've heard this, instead of, I am so excited to get started, just remember, I am here for you as long as you possibly need me, for whenever you need me. Just call, right?
Oh my God, no.
Night, it doesn't, Thanksgiving, just call. I don't love turkey all that much. I'm happy to abandon my family and run out and spend more time with you, right? Now, clearly, the tail end of that is not exactly what I'm hearing. And yet, remember that I'm here for you whenever, and it doesn't matter how long it takes for us to get this job done together. That's why I'm here. That is not a value proposition. Well, let me restate that. That is not a great value proposition, right? It's kind of a terrible value proposition for you and for the client. Remember, part of the reason the client hires you is so they don't have to spend time figuring it all out. They have you to help them figure it all out and shorten their learning curve and shorten the whole experience, right? It is not true that most buyers have to see 30 or 40 houses before they make a decision. That's just not true. What that says to me is that we're not doing a great job up front. We're not doing a great job in the consultation with the needs analysis to really understand what it is they are looking for, and then keeping their focus narrow on the things they told us, right? We're going to talk about how you make those adjustments and how you that's not a word is not the word I'm looking for. How you address, that's the word I was looking for. It was not a difficult word that I couldn't find. How you address someone, oh yes, or reevaluate. Thank you very much, Alex. Either one of them works, right? That was the word. How you address or reevaluate after you've started with someone, when you can see that the path that you're going down is let's see 727 homes before I make a decision or drive each of us crazy, one of the two, right? Because sometimes we drive each other crazy before we find the house, right? Sometimes we find the house before we drive each other crazy. And yet at some point, one of those things shows up. It's just a matter of which comes first, if we haven't set really good expectations up front. I wanted to tell you a quick story on that, and that is proof that script works. Early in my career, I used it from day one. I didn't make it up. Well, I made up the words, but I didn't make up the concept. I heard it from someone and said, that's a really good idea. Like, why wouldn't you just tell people what the expectation is so they understand, right? Because some people think, because they heard from a friend of a friend of a friend who had a really crappy real estate agent, that seeing 37 houses is just what you do, right? How could you possibly make a decision if you haven't seen 37 houses? I don't know about the rest of you, but that to me would be like, okay, gun to head, boom. Not a happy experience, right? 37 houses, oh my stars. I think I have, the most I've ever seen is like 8 or 9 houses. And then I get cars the same way, right? Investment properties the same way. Oh my goodness, who has the time to go and shop? Does it look good? Does it have nice pictures? Do the numbers work? All right, let's buy it. Now, I'm not saying that your buyers will be as objective as that. However, your buyers will take cues from you. And so if you believe that it takes 37 houses before you can make a decision, then that's what you'll communicate. Either verbally or non-verbally, that's what you'll communicate, right? So make sure that you are in the mindset, you have that mindset of here's the policy, here's how it works, here's what we're going to accomplish together, and here's how we're going to do it. So here's the story. Early in my career, I was working with first-time home buyers, used that script as we went out. We went out that first weekend. My policy was never to show more than 4 homes at a time, right? Except in rare instances where someone was coming in like a relocation person who was here on a buying trip, right? Sometimes that's real. They're here for 2 days. They need to see 12 houses or 14 houses in 2 days, and they're picking one of those because they're moving here in 3 weeks. Other than that, I limited things to 4 when at all possible. Why would you limit to 4 properties each time you meet with a buyer?
Otherwise, they get overwhelmed and they can't even remember what they've seen.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right, Michelle. It gets all like gobbledygook in their head. It's like, who can remember what house was what, and which, the blue house, was the blue house the one with 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms? Which one had the pool? What was that? The one had the really flat backyard. I loved that one because the kitchen was updated. No, it wasn't. Yes, it was. No, it wasn't. Yes, it was. Right? So they all get jumbled up. So 4, people can kind of keep things in perspective. And so we saw 4 that first weekend, and I asked for some feedback, and they weren't really interested in purchasing any of those 4. And then the next weekend, I showed them 4 more. And we got to weekend number 3, and these were kind of young kids who, again, they were first-time home buyers. They were fun, and they were newly married, and they were just a lot of fun to be with, right? Bubbly, chatty. Well, weekend 3 comes, and 2 entirely different people showed up. They were quiet. They were like weird and moody. They weren't very chatty. I thought, man, oh man, like they had like a really big fight on the way to come and see me, because something is wrong here. Either that, or like, maybe they have a sick relative, or, I mean, something drastic was wrong. And so I didn't address it at first. We went and saw the first house. They were kind of weird the whole time. After the first house, I asked my question like I always do. So, I'm curious, is this a house that you think you want to purchase? And they said, no, we don't like it. Great. We crumpled that one up, threw it in the back seat. And driving from house number 1 to house number 2, I decided to address it and said, guys, I can't help but notice that you're a little quiet today. Is everything okay? And they said, yeah, no, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Okay, well, I'm not sure I believe you, but all right, let's soldier on, right? House number 2 comes. Same weirdness. We get in the car again, ask them again. Guys, just checking in, because we usually have lots of conversation around each of these houses, and you've kind of shut these ones down really quickly. Are you sure that nothing has changed in your criteria that we should address? No. This is kind of what we're looking for. It's just we don't like that one. Okay, great. House number 3, I couldn't stand it anymore. Right? So we get out of house number 3, and before we even got back in the car, I said, can we just stop and have a quick conversation? And they said, sure. I said, I want you to recognize 2 things. I don't own any of these houses, right? So your feedback is important to make sure that we're viewing the right things. Second, I have to believe that there's something you're not telling me. So I just want to encourage you, if I've done something or said something, I'm okay. I'm a big boy. Just let me know. And I apologize if it's my fault. Just let me know where we stand. They still denied it. We got in the car. We started driving to the other house. And I could see him and her. She was in the front seat with me. He was in the back seat. And they're looking back like trying to catch each other's eye. I'm seeing it happen in my rearview mirror, right? I said, guys, there's got to be something you need to tell me. What is it? And so she finally looked at him and looked at me and said, Rick, I don't know how to tell you this, but we are so terrified. I said, you're terrified? What? Why are you terrified? They said, well, because this is house number 12. Guys, I didn't get it when they said it. I'm looking at them like, this is house number 12? What does that even mean? And so I guess she saw in my face that I didn't put 2 and 2 together. And she said, when we started a couple of weeks ago, you said that most of your clients find a house after 8 to 12 houses. And this is house number 12. And we're just so terrified that we're not going to like this one, that you're not going to show us any more houses. It's like, holy cow. So if you think setting those kinds of expectations don't take hold in people's brains, there is an example that they absolutely do, right? They absolutely do. These folks were like panic stricken that they either had to buy number 12 or I was done with them, which is not what I ever said. I just set the expectation that most of my clients, find a house between 8 and 12. And so I laughed and I said, guys, oh my goodness, I am so sorry to have that you misunderstood what I was saying. I was just kind of laying some groundwork in terms of averages. If it takes you 14 or 16, I thought that no problem. I'm here for you. Oh, thank God. And their shoulders relaxed and they got fine. And we had a lovely time seeing house number 12. Just PS, they bought house number 14, right? That next weekend we went out, we didn't even have to see all 4. We walked into the number 2 and they said, oh man, this is the house. This is the house, right? So that 8 to 14 is just a guide, but I tell you that story to make a point that the expectation setting for people is very, very powerful. It's not exactly like Jedi mind tricks, but it's pretty close, right? These are not the droids you're looking for. Okay, we clearly need more Star Wars fans on this call. There's like 3 people who are nodding their head and everyone else is like, what on earth is he talking about? All right, whatever. I've cut out most of my movie references to save us time. When you used to come and sit with me in class, you used to get a million movie references. Ask Donna, she'll tell you. That's one of the things I've done to save time and get us through this faster. Is none of my movie references have come to the table. Oh man, you guys are killing me. Hey, so let's have this conversation since we went there, and then we'll start on the consultation scripts. Let's just have a quick conversation around something else I mentioned, right? One of the things I want to encourage you to do, because some of you may be out with buyers already, so I want to give you some of these strategies and tips while we're learning the whole consultation, so that if you're already out with buyers, you can start using some of this stuff right away. One of the things that I did with my buyers is that there was 2 things. First of all, there was a recognition that really what we were there to do was eliminate properties, right? Most people come at it from the perspective of let's find the one you love. That's not really what buyers do. Really what buyers do, and our job is to help them eliminate all the ones they don't want, so that what's left naturally is something that they may purchase, right? And so one of the ways that I used to do that was, as we'd see property, after each and every one, I would ask the same questions. So I'm curious, Tom and Mary, is this a home you'd be interested in purchasing? It's a pretty simple, direct question, right? And now they got to answer it. Why don't a lot of agents ask that question? One very simple answer.
They want to keep identifying homes they're interested in, not rule out ones they're not.
Why do agents not ask that question? That may be, Margaret, why the on the other side, why the buyers. Is that what you were answering?
No, I was saying, I think as a buyer's agent, we keep hoping there's a lot of options and we don't necessarily want to rule ones out. I don't know. That's just a guess.
Oh, interesting. Okay, got it. Here's what I've learned. Agents don't ask the question because they live in terror of the P word. What's the P word?
Pushy.
You're pushy. They're so terrified of being pushy. Guys, some of you are going to be so terrified of being pushy that you're going to bankrupt yourselves. You're not going to be able to make your mortgage payments because you won't make any money because you're so afraid of being pushy. Here's what I can tell you. Clients hire us to be aggressive on their behalf. And I know a lot of you don't like that word because you link aggressive with pushy and pushy with used car salesman and used car salesman with that's not what I want to be. They're not, you're connecting dots that don't necessarily connect. You can certainly behave in that manner if you so choose. You can behave in a pushy manner. But I'm going to tell you, in all my years working with buyers, nobody ever came to me and said, you're pushy. And I would ask those upfront questions all the time. Instead, what I found my clients said about me was, you know what? We always knew where we stood with you. We always knew where we stood in the process. we knew you always would tell us the truth. Because there wasn't all this like tap dancing and walking on eggshells in what I would say, right? So just ask a simple question. Guys, they're with you in the car viewing these properties because they have waved their arms saying, we'd like to buy a house. So when you show them one, why wouldn't you ask them, hey, just curious, is that one that meets your needs enough that you want to buy it? And then you get the feedback.
Especially since we're in a seller's market, Rick, it may not be available if they're going to wait for a week.
Well, isn't that the truth, right? It may not be available if they're going to wait an hour and a half, just by the way. Right? So if you want to buy that one, we need to move on it now. If you don't want to buy that one, that's cool. And if they don't want to buy that one, guess what? We take it, we crumple it up, and we throw it in the back seat. That was my system. I wanted to visually show them that house off the table. Now, after there was more than one or two, we would add a question in because then I wanted them ranked. So after we showed a property, it was, I'm curious, is that a property that meets enough of your criteria that you might want to purchase it? And if the answer was yes, no, or in between, no. Well, if the answer was yes, conversation over. Great, let's get back in the car, go back to the office, do the work we need to do and write up that offer. Well, maybe we should see 17 other properties first. No, you know what, I think the better move, if this is a property that you think you want to purchase, is to go back to the office. We'll suspend the search for today. Let's write that offer up, get that offer in. And then if you want to see another house or two to compare it to the property that you've made the offer on as we negotiated, I'm happy to make those arrangements. But we're not going to waste time seeing other properties that may not be right for you when you found the one that is right, right? It's like in search of something better. People are always in search of something better. Guys, sometimes it doesn't get any better. Right? So the ranking system is this. Well, no, I don't think we want to purchase that one. Great, so we crumple that sucker up. I'm curious, if you had to buy one of these two or the three that we've seen, like gun to your head, you have to buy it. Which one would you buy? Well, I think I'd buy the one we were just in. Great, talk to me about why. Why would you buy that one over the other two? Well, because it had this, this, and this, and whatever. You know, it was the best value, whatever their reasoning is. Great. So let's do this. What I'd like to do is, as we eliminate properties, I'd also like to keep a ranking of properties, so that at any given time, you know that there's a property that you might just purchase because it outweighs or outranks all the other properties we've seen together. Then we see the next one. So I'm curious, you chose number 3, between 3 and 4. Does 3 still have it, or are you replacing it with 4? No, I think if we had to buy one of these houses we've seen, I think we'd still buy number 3. Great. Because I'll tell you what, this is the strategy behind that. What I have found is sometimes what happens is the next week or the following week, because we just keep seeing properties and they keep comparing them, and number 3 just keeps popping to the top. Now remember, after showing them number 3, I asked the question, is this a property you want to purchase? And they said no. Well, now we're another week or two out, we've seen a bunch more houses, but 3 keeps popping up. That by the end of the next week, I'm going to remind them, guys, you know, I just want to bring to your attention that of all the things we've seen, that number 3 still keeps popping up. I just checked, and it is still available. I'm wondering if that's something we should go back and take a second look at, because based on comparisons of all the things that are on the market for you, that's the one that you keep saying yes to. Let's go check it out for a second look. I've sold people houses that way, because now all of a sudden they're back there for a second time saying, why aren't we buying this house? right? They said no because it was house number 3. Well, now they've got another 3 or another 4 or 5 houses under their belt. They've seen a little bit more what's on the market, and number 3 still stands out. So help them recognize that maybe they moved on from number 3 because they wanted to find something better. They were looking for that perfect house, right? Now they've realized that that doesn't really exist, and number 3 is actually a pretty awesome house. Does that make sense? So just two quick strategies, elimination and ranking, which I think help people keep things straight in their head, which prevents you and them from spending 7.5 months in 94 different houses before you make a decision. Yes? All righty. Let's do this. Let's dive into the Mastering the Buyer Consultation scripts. They were emailed to you earlier today. I think you got them like 9 times, right? Because I think I sent them, then the office sent them, right? So
That was very pushy, Rick.
Indeed. You betcha, Margaret. I'll wear that like a badge all day long. I am aggressive on your behalf. Have these scripts, damn it, have these scripts. So let's talk a little bit about this buyer consultation. Why do you think it's important that you have a buyer consultation prior to heading out with any buyer? Why do you think it's important?
You want to understand what's important to them, what the non-negotiables are, and all that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Erica nailed it. Without a consultation, it's very unlikely that you will have any kind of a comprehensive needs analysis with them, which means they're telling you things that are typically quite shallow and off the cuff, and you're not diving deep. You're not having a conversation around what's really important to them. Do you think understanding, both them understanding and you understanding at a really deep level, what really is driving their purchase saves everybody time, effort, and money?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, right? It's the name of the game, or else everyone's guessing, right? It's funny because oftentimes people say to me, without the buyer consult, there's no way for you to know as their agent what's really motivating them. I'm going to say to you, I agree with that. And yet I think there's an even more important reason why you do the buyer consult. Who else doesn't know what's motivating them?
The buyer.
The buyer themselves, right? The buyer themselves, they haven't connected with somebody who's going to ask questions the way we're going to teach you how to ask questions. There's a self-discovery process that we're about to go through with our buyers it's thorough, it's comprehensive, it's a little like therapy depending on how they answer the questions, right? Sometimes when they answer the questions, there's emotion that comes out, right? Because you're not just asking, you're not just snorkeling, right? You're scuba diving, you're going deeper. And I will tell you that if you run your buyer side business from the snorkeling perspective, where you're just kind of floating with a mask looking down, you miss so much. You miss so much. Right? And that's how you get sunburn. Ooh, good analogy, right? Because you're floating on top of the water, you get sunburn. If you scuba dive, now you're going deep. You're protected from the burn. I just made that up on the spot. It wasn't that great. I might use it again, though. We'll see. Or I might just go back to movie references. All right, so if the consultation is crazy important, why is it that so many real estate agents skip it? What do you think?
Because they're afraid that it'll drive the buyer away.
Yeah, Lisa said the first two words that are dead on. They're afraid.
They're afraid.
Right? It's fear, right? It's fear. It's business fear. It doesn't mean you're a scaredy cat. It's just business fear. And typically what I find business fear comes from a scarcity mindset, right? We've talked about a mindset of abundance versus a mindset of scarcity, right? And fear, business fear, comes from having that mindset of scarcity. That if I have a system that I put all of my buyers through, if I have a system I put all of my sellers through, that somehow that's going to scare enough people away that I won't make any money, and I have to make some money. So I have to do the things that they want to do the way they want to do them. Because if I have any kind of rules whatsoever and try to assert them, I'll lose business. I have found, and I think that agents with experience on this call would agree with me, the exact opposite is true. The exact opposite is true. Anybody want to comment on that?
I'll share for a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
So when I do a listing, when I do a buyer consultation, we're not just doing the needs analysis. That's part of it. We're also going over what the process is and how we're going to work together. What I expect in my business, what they'll be doing, what I'll be doing for them. You know, we have a lot of ground to set up here. It isn't just willy-nilly. There's a lot of things we have to cover to see if we're going to work together properly. And then we decide.
Yeah. Let me ask this question, because to Donna's point, if you need surgery, do you just call the surgeon and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to come in on Wednesday. I'd like you to cut here, here, and here. And I'm pretty certain that whatever's bothering me is kind of right under there. If you could just kind of, you know, snip that and do that and tie that off and whatnot, and then just kind of sew me, that would be great. No. And yet, as real estate agents, we oftentimes allow buyers to come in and tell us exactly what they want to do, the way they want to do it. And we just say, okay. Instead of saying, ooh, you know what? That approach might put you in jeopardy. That's what the surgeon would say if you said, you know, trust me, you know what, I was feeling all over here and I'm pretty certain that, so again, I think just 2 or 3 little cuts right here would do it. The surgeon would say, well, what the surgeon would say is, what are you, nuts? But what the surgeon would mean is, you know what, instead, why don't you come in? Let's have a consult. Let's have a discussion around what's bothering you, why it's bothering you, how long it's been bothering you, what you I want to hear what you think. But then I'd like to also interject some things that I think based on my experience. And then we can come up with a plan together and then schedule implementation of said plan. Right? That's how the surgeon would handle that kind of a thing. It's the same thing in your business, right? You run a professional service business. And so do you have a process that you put everybody through? Because without that process, you fear on their behalf that it would put them in jeopardy. Right? So the first thing I'm going to encourage you to do is leave this call, not now, but when we're done, leave this call and make buyer consults a non-negotiable for yourselves every single time. Every single time. Make it a policy. Right? When someone calls and says, hey, I want to go see that house. Excellent. Let's do this. Let's meet at my office and have a quick consult to make certain that you don't put yourself in jeopardy in this process. Oh no, I don't need that. I just want to see that one house. Understood. Understood. Unfortunately, I have a process that we need to go through before we can kind of past the gate of seeing property together. And that process is designed to save you time, effort, energy, and money. Does that sound like a benefit that would be worth 20 minutes of your time before we go and see a property? Maybe a little longer if you have questions. Right? And you corral them in the office and you have that consult. Here's what I can tell you. If you think you're going to go and have the consult at the house or over the trunk of the car, that doesn't happen. You go with good intentions, thinking you're going to have a conversation, and it doesn't happen. Mostly because the environment is not conducive to such a conversation when you're standing in someone's living room or you're standing in their driveway, right? So just create a policy for yourself. This is how I run my business. I run my business first and foremost with a consult. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think it's possible in these days with COVID and everything to do that, virtually, to have the conversation?
I think it's more than possible. I think it's encouraged, right? I'll tell you, one of the best pieces of feedback I've received from many of our agents is pushing their buyer consults to Zoom consults, simply because it allows them to have the consultation before the Saturday morning at 10 o'clock where you're meeting to actually show properties. Instead of having somebody come in and be anxious about wanting to get out of the office to go see those properties, which is ultimately what they're there for and what they want from you, right? You get to do it beforehand, so that Saturday morning is just, hey, nice to put a non-shaked hand. I forgot we can't shake hands, right? Nice to put an elbow to an elbow, right? Let's head out and get to work. And you've already taken care of the buyer consult via Zoom. So yeah, Michelle, great point. It's not only possible, it's encouraged. It's offered an interesting opportunity for us to streamline the process a little bit more and get the information we need up front, and then make decisions about what properties we'll see on Saturday from this consult. I can remember having the consult. I've already made 2 or 3 appointments, right? Having the consult and thinking, oh my goodness, most of the properties I set up for them don't meet their criteria. And so now what are we going to do? Can we even get appointments? If I replace them, should I cancel them? Should we go and see them anyway, right? So that process of doing your Zoom call with them on Thursday night and having your first appointment on Saturday morning is a great structure to the buyer consult. Great point. All right, so I keep promising we're going to get to the actual consultation. Let's do it. Let's start with the scripts, right? So you can see that step number 1 in mastering the buyer consult is setting the stage, right? Similar to the first step on the listing side, where this is designed for you to meet them in the office and have this consultation. You can certainly change the top part of the script if you're doing it via Zoom, right? You wouldn't ask, did you have any trouble finding the office, right? Because they're not in the office, right? You can simply change that to, great to see you, great to meet you, even if it's only digitally for the time being. I can't wait to see you in person. So let's do this. Somebody volunteer to bring us through setting the stage. I'll be your buyer. That means you get to read the script and I get to make up the answers. So you get the easy part. Somebody volunteer to bring us through this.
I'll do it.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Hi, Rick. It's Margaret. It's great to meet you.
Yes, and you.
So I'm really excited to start this home process with you. Obviously, we're not here in person, but I do want to let you know I'm going to turn my cell phone off so we don't have any interruptions. So boom.
Oh, great. Thanks.
So I just want to let you know that today's meeting is all about you. My job is to keep us focused to find out what kind of home will suit your lifestyle, your needs, your wants, and your budget. So we'll talk a little bit about the home buying process, answer your questions, and then discuss expectations and our roles. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. So there are really three possible outcomes to today's meeting. One, you'll understand all of the benefits that I can provide to you and your home search, and you'll hire me as your buyer's agent, which of course I hope will happen. Number two is, after hearing what I can offer, you may decide that what I bring to the table isn't a good fit for you and your family, and you can choose not to hire me. Or three, it's possible that I may determine that I can't meet or exceed the expectations that you have set, and so I'll choose to turn you down now rather than let you down later. So does that make sense?
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Okay, terrific. So let's switch gears and let's talk about the home that you want.
Okay, let's stop there. Beautiful. Margaret did that so well, didn't she?
Yep.
So let's just break this down, right? What do you notice about this script? It's very, very similar to the list side, right? You've got the intro stuff at the top, and then that middle piece on the listing side, we tagged as the agenda. Do you remember that? So that middle piece here, I want you to know that today's meeting is all about you. Through that paragraph is the buyer side version of the agenda, right? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to find out all about what the story is. We're going to talk about your budget. We're going to talk about the buying process. We're going to answer questions, discuss expectations. So you're laying out for them what this 20-minute more if you have questions meeting is all about. Right? Similar to the listing side, having an agenda for your meeting is important to both parties, right? And one thing I skipped over is Margaret did very deftly adapt for the Zoom environment the fact that she was turning her cell phone off, right? Maybe more powerful in person, and yet certainly as powerful on Zoom. Why do we even say that, whether we're on Zoom or in person? What's the point?
You're giving them your full attention, and hopefully they'll do the same.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Has anyone ever had a conversation with someone who had their phone in their hand, and as they're like half looking at you, their phone is buzzing or dinging, and they just keep glancing down and glancing down and glancing? Doesn't that drive you bananas? Right? It's like either look at me and have a conversation or don't. It's okay either way, but please don't do both, because you're cheating me out of something there, or you're cheating the person who's buzzing you out of something there. So why don't you make a choice? Right? And as a professional, we want to be certain that we are communicating to our buyers that we're about to say the words, today's meeting is all about you. Can you imagine if you said that and then started glancing down at your phone because someone was texting you? Do you see how immediately you have eliminated all validity to anything you were about to say? Right? Talk about shooting yourself in the foot. My stars. So you've got that intro piece, you've got the agenda piece, and then, just like on the list side, we set some expectations that this is what kind of a meeting. Starts with an H.
Meeting.
Say it again.
A business meeting.
Yes, a business meeting that's going to focus on a very certain specific task that's in that last big paragraph. Starts with an H. Ends with hiring.
Hiring.
Hiring, there we go. It's a hiring meeting, right? We want to make sure that people understand exactly why they're here. We're not just chit-chatting today before we go out and see property, or we're not just chit-chatting on a Thursday night to get ready to go see property. This is a consultation that will end in one way. It'll end in a conversation about you hiring me or not. Now, I will tell you that sometimes people come to me and say, you know, I'm really nervous about the buyer document. I'm afraid to talk with people about it. I'm afraid to ask people to sign it. I have asked people to sign it. They've said no. And every single time I hear that, I ask the same question. I'm curious, what did the first part of your buyer consult look like? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is buyer consult. What do you mean by that? Right? Guys, if you don't set the expectation up front, it feels like an ambush later on. If all you've done is say happy, fun things, and you're dancing around, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. It's going to be so much fun, and I'm lovely and you're lovely, and oh, it's houses and it's, oh, yay. And then 25 minutes later, you say, oh, and by the way, the only way you get all that is to sign your life away by signing this legal contract. Now, that's clearly not what you say, but it's what they hear. Right? So now all of a sudden you've jumped out of the bushes with an ambush of legal contract. It's no wonder that you get some resistance. When you address it right up front and make clear for everybody that one of the things we're here to do is to have a hiring conversation and give them some options, right? That paragraph gives them options. You're either going to hire me, and I love what Margaret did there. I used to do the exact same thing, Margaret. My scripts were, you either hire me, which would be great, or you may find that, whatever number 2 is, you may decide that what I bring to the table is not a good value for you and your family, and you may choose not to hire me, which, frankly, would make me sad. That was my little add-on after that one. So you can kind of personalize that a little bit. Margaret did that naturally. Or 3, after our discussion, I may find that I can't meet and exceed the expectations that are important to you. And if that's the case, I'd rather turn you down now than let you down later, right? Why is that such an important part of that script? What is it we're communicating there?
That you're not totally in control here. It's a reciprocal thing.
100%. Yeah, 100%. There are choices here. You have choices and I have choices, right? And I will tell you that what I have learned over the course of my career is that when the result is less important, you get to focus on the process, which creates the results you're looking for. If you're just so worried about the result, again, you're communicating that right from the get-go. People can tell, right? They can tell that you're either a little nervous or that this is really important. Like if you don't sign with me today, I'm going to lose my house. Here's what I can tell you. That's not their problem. And when you start communicating that kind of heaviness, it's no wonder you get some pushback, right? You've got to keep it always focused on them and keep it lighter in that, you know what I do for a living is this. I do these consults, and sometimes these consults end in me being hired and we work in partnership and we buy a house together. Sometimes these consults end in something different where we choose not to, and that's okay too. Now, again, mindset creeps in here. Abundance versus scarcity. If you have a mindset of scarcity, you won't behave the way I just spoke. That either outcome is okay. If you have a mindset of scarcity, the result matters. See the difference? And what's interesting is you're in a more powerful position to actually obtain what it is you desire if you will come from that mindset of abundance that says, here's what we're going to do. Here are the choices. Any other questions on setting the stage? All right. So Margaret, do me a favor, just bring us home on the bottom there, because I stopped you before that last paragraph. Bring us home, then we're going to go into the needs analysis.
Okay, hang on a sec. Let me just get that back up again. Oops, wrong one. Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about the home that you want.
Perfect.
I'm going to be asking a lot of questions in order to develop a clear understanding of what you're looking for in your next home. That way, I won't waste your time by taking you to see properties that don't suit you. How does that sound?
That sounds A+. So just remember, let's stop there because I want to just talk about features versus benefits, right? We didn't talk about this on the list side, and it is kind of an important concept to grasp as you're building and growing and scaling your business. You want to be certain that you're always speaking to clients and potential clients from the perspective of benefits, right? Features are just the things that get done, right? For example, Margaret said, I'm going to develop a clear understanding of what you're looking for in your next home. Well, that's just a feature. That's just something she does. She turns it into a benefit by then explaining to them why it's important to them. Like, what's in it for me? So we're going to have this conversation. Big whoop-de-doo. Until Margaret explains to me that by doing so, she now won't waste my time and take me to see properties that aren't suitable. Ah, I get it now. That's why it's important to me. That's the benefit of the feature. The feature is just, let's have a needs analysis. The benefit is, I won't waste your time.
Mhm.
You see how that works? So regardless on what side of the transaction you're on, if you're looking to build a business around listings or build a listing around buyers, you constantly want to be speaking from the perspective of what's in it for them. What's the benefit version of this, right? I'll give you an example on the listing side, just because we didn't cover it. I list houses on the MLS. Well, there's a feature, right? How could you say the same thing as a benefit?
Because I'm a member of the MLS, I'll be able to have your home posted and we'll have broad exposure to all of the realtors in the area.
Exactly. I love that. That's exactly the concept, right? And if you're going to go with features from the position of MLS, go big, right? Go big. My version of that might be, by listing in the MLS, we get to, through website syndication, we get to expose your property to qualified buyers locally, across the country, and around the world. There's a benefit, right? Versus list on the MLS. So feature versus benefit is important as you're describing the things that you do, because if you're just making a list, anybody can make a list. And when you're just making a list, buyers hear it, sellers hear it, and they're just kind of empty words. What they really attach to is why it's important to them, how it's a benefit to them. So continue to convert things into benefits. All righty, step number 2, the needs analysis. In order so that we have clarity around the needs analysis, later on in your packet, there's a form that looks just like this, and it's called the top 5 must-have list. So if you printed things out, do me a favor, take out your top 5 must-have list and set that on the side while you have the scripts open to the needs analysis. If you didn't print it, you may just have to know what page that is and kind of pop back and forth as I'm talking about both of them. We're going to work through this needs analysis and have the basis be the top 5 must-have list. Top 5 must-have list is a crazy important tool to utilize with your buyers. It's not hard to figure out what we use it for, right? Our needs analysis is going to create the top 5 most important things that this person or this couple are looking for in a property. Now take a look at the top 5 must-have list before we get into the scripts. What is the very first thing it says at the top? There's no such thing as what?
As a perfect house.
As a 100% house. That's exactly right. There's no such thing as a perfect house. Doesn't exist. And so then it goes on to say, let's agree that when we find a 90 to 95% house with your 5 must-haves, it will prompt discussion about making an offer. We are laying out the terms of how we're going to process this transaction with the buyer right up front. Why is it so crazy important to have this discussion right now? The discussion of, let's agree that when you get to a 90% house or so, it's going to prompt discussion of an offer.
So they don't just keep looking for something that checks all the boxes.
My stars, that's exactly right. Right? Because people sometimes think that they don't have to concede on anything. Right? Buying a house is about sacrifice. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice. There are things that are non-negotiables, and everything else you have to weigh the pros and cons of having it or not having it, right? And so when we help them right up front with the conversation that says, let's agree that when we get to that 90% mark, we're going to it's prompting a discussion. That doesn't necessarily mean we're writing an offer, but it's prompting discussion of writing an offer. You're outlining for them the expectation that when you see a property that meets most of their criteria, that you're going to bring up the fact that, hey, do you agree that this one meets most of the criteria? And do you remember what we talked about? When that happens, it was going to prompt discussion of writing an offer. I'm curious, should we be talking about writing an offer on this one? For those of you who are afraid of sounding pushy, when you set the expectation up front that that's just part of the process, the goal is to help you feel better about asking the question, right? But by allowing the buyer to know that you're going to do it. You're telling them right up front, this is how it's going to work. Does that make sense to everybody?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So in a market like this, where, for example, I'm taking buyers around after this call, and there are so few things in their price point, they may not get any other things other than the fact of the number of bedrooms. Like, how do you handle that, where I don't want to set them up to think they can have even 80% of what they want? How do you discuss the fact that, it's a seller's market and you may have to just, not get everything you want? I don't know, without being negative.
Sure. Well, it's a great question. And I think I would answer it from the perspective of objective and negative are typically two different things, right? So remain objective, and you don't have to worry about it being negative. Remain objective if that's really the case. I would still encourage a top 5 must-have list, right? I would still encourage utilizing this tool as they go to see property, right? The top 5 must-have list might be 4 bedrooms, 2 full baths, some kind of flat yard, a fireplace in the living room, and hardwood floors. Now, if in fact they have a top 5 must-have list that has some more specific type things on it, right? You may have to have a follow-up conversation after a couple of houses where that thing, maybe just doesn't exist. You may have to have the conversation to say, hey, let's sit down and have just a quick follow-up on the top 5 must-have list. What's the one thing on here that you've noticed we haven't seen one time in the last 3 houses or so? Oh yeah, it's that, I don't know, whatever it is. It's the 4-car garage. Yeah, so here's what I'm thinking. What would happen if the 4-car garage just wasn't available? Where do you think you'd go on that? Does it make sense for us to be looking at properties right now? Now already that from your needs analysis, right? Because we're jumping the gun because we didn't do needs analysis yet. From the needs analysis that the reason that a 4-car garage is on the top 5 must-have list is because this is a car collector, right? And so he needs some version of something that's either tandem for 4 cars or 4 bays. And you've probably already had the discussion in the needs analysis, but just in case you didn't, this discussion could be, does it make sense, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, to also look at properties that have 2-car garages, since that's far more common to the inventory that's available in Fairfield County, with enough room in the budget and enough property on enough acreage that you could purchase perhaps a standalone 2-car garage to complement the attached 2-car garage. Is that a way that we could maybe solve the issue of the 4-car garage? Knowing full well that, again, as you've seen in the last 3 houses or so, that's just really hard to come by locally. Does that answer that in at least a basic way, Margaret?
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you.
Rick,
Yes.
so when I'm sorry, I think you actually said it. What would happen? Your question was, what would happen if X wasn't available? Is that how you would phrase that?
Yeah, it's actually, if you look at the step 2, the needs analysis, if you look at the questions at the bottom, one of them is, I'm curious, what happens if we cannot find that specific feature?
Got it.
Right. So like I said, we're kind of objection handling prematurely because we hadn't gone through the questions for the needs analysis yet. But yeah, that's one of those questions. And to be just direct in that, to say, I had somebody once who absolutely needed an indoor pool. And I said, do you mean an in-ground pool? And he said, no, an indoor pool. Like, oh, okay. For $450 in Norwalk? So let's talk about that a little bit, right? I'm curious, what happens if we can't locate that specific feature? Simply because indoor pools, Mr. Buyer, already skews the pool of inventory that will meet your needs from here down to a minuscule number of properties. And in Fairfield County, what we find is in that price point, for a home with an indoor pool, the price point is typically more in the $900,000 to $1.3 million range than it is the $450,000 to $5 million range. And so I'm curious, what happens if we can't locate the indoor pool in that price range in Norwalk? Right, you're going to push that back to them and have them kind of work through. Well, can we try? Certainly we can. As a matter of fact, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a step back and just real quick open the pop on the MLS and let me just show you indoor pool, how that skews the inventory. Look, there's 37 different homes that you could see. Indoor pool, look, there's 0. Right, and so I'm curious, do you feel like being limited by that indoor pool is something that will create the result you're looking for? Now, this particular person happened to be a little cuckoo, and so they hung on to that indoor pool until we decided that this was not going to work out so well, right? And yet, usually you can help people see by just kind of showing them, don't have them take your word for it. Show them the facts. Here's what's available in that price range right now. Boom, we pop that in. Shoot. Make sense?
Well, Rick, I got a quick question.
Yes.
I was thinking, so there's no way we can play with the price points that I was after the bid or anything, right? So we would just have to keep searching for new homes that would fit their criteria, right?
So tell me what you mean by play with the price points after the bid.
Yeah, once the bid, it's set at that, right? There's no way to get that price down, or if that person doesn't like that range of price, but they really like the home, there's no way to really play with the price at that point, is there?
Well, one can always make an offer that one thinks works on a particular property. In today's market, it's a whole lot harder to have negotiating power as a buyer. And yet there, there's always flexibility in what one offers. I think I'm going to answer the question slightly differently, Daniel, and tell me if I missed the mark on answering it. If you find that you have a buyer who has champagne tastes on a beer budget, right? Because that shows up a lot. I'd like this, and this, and I can spend X. Well, me too. Right? One of the things I used to say to buyers not in a finger wagging way, but in a jovial manner, to say, oh my goodness, here's what I can tell you. If there was ever a house like that for that much money, you wouldn't stand a chance. I'd buy it twice before you.
Exactly.
Right? And so you can kind of make a joke out of it. You have to be a little cautious because some people hear that differently than you intended. But most people will say, get the point, the ha ha ha. One of the things that you may have to do up front is help people recognize what's realistic, right? If they're coming from Des Moines, Iowa, and buying in Fairfield County, right, you may have to help them through that process.
Understand a little bit more. Yeah.
And so what that means to me is they'll give you their top 5 must-have list. And if it doesn't jive with their range, you may have to help them adjust their range before they start making offers. So the adjustment in the numbers happens beforehand, right? So if you're looking for these things, we either have to spend some more money, or you may have to look at eliminating some of these must-haves. I'm curious, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, does it make sense for us, especially in the current state of the market, to actually move down $25,000 or $50,000 in a price point so that you're now looking at the best of a lower price point instead of the tougher stuff in the higher price point, right? There's a bunch of different conversations here. Am I hitting the nail at least somewhat on the head from your question?
I appreciate it. I completely agree. I like the way you go about things. You make it fun for people.
Yeah, because here's the thing: people don't want to be scolded. They don't want to be told that they can't afford things. And yet there is a simple reality. One of the things I used to say a lot when I was working with buyers is, boy, man, from your lips to God's ears, we just don't have that here. Right? And that was a script that worked a lot. People would come and say, I want a bargain. Great. Can you quantify? Can you tell me what that means for you? What does bargain look like for you? Well, what do you mean? Well, people have different opinions of what a bargain is. Are you talking about something at market value, under market value? If it's under market value, are you talking about 5% below market, 10% below market, 20% below market? Can you define what you mean by bargain? Oh, yeah, sure. Well, yeah, I think minimally at least 10% below market. Got it. Boy, oh boy. I certainly wish that was something that we could assist you with, but we just don't have that here. I'm curious, do they have that where you're moving from? Yeah, the house we bought was that. Oh boy. That may be an opportunity for me as an investor. Where did you say you were from again? Right? Unfortunately, we just don't have that here. Don't be afraid, guys, to just tell the truth, right? And again, that comes from scarcity versus abundance from a mindset perspective. Sometimes we don't want to say we don't have that here for fear someone will say, oh, all right, well then I guess I'm not going to buy a house. Thanks, bye. And now you're out a client. Guys, they weren't buying anything from you anyway because they had such unrealistic expectations. And if you're not willing to help them set realistic expectations right from the get-go via consultation, there's not really a value to them in having the consult with you, right? Part of the value we bring to the table is helping people understand at a deeper level what's motivating them, what's important to them, and what's real for them. Yes? All right. We were so close to actually getting to the needs analysis. We were right there. We actually danced right around it. And now we've got only 3 minutes, and I can't start a demonstration of a needs analysis in 3 minutes. So here's what I'd like you to do. Between now and Friday, if you remember Friday, we start at 4 o'clock. If you would read through the 2 pages of the needs analysis, I will demonstrate it for you right out of the gate on Friday. So don't be late. Be on time or a little early on Friday. I'm going to dive right in on Friday and take you through an example that I'll model for you of a proper needs analysis. So somebody just decide to be my my buyer. You don't have to tell me now, or Alex comes on and she can be the buyer on Friday. Thank you for that. Right, and I'll walk you through. We'll just demonstrate for you what a needs analysis sounds like, so you can hear it, and then we'll cruise through the rest of the buyer script, which is actually quite simple because we don't spend a lot of time together on much of it. I do want to spend time on Friday with the buyer agreement and walk you through that so that you have an understanding of what that looks like, and run through the anatomy of a buyer transaction. So we're going to see how far we get on Friday. My guess is that we're still going to at least need Monday from the perspective of our extension period, but we may not need more than Monday, right? So let's see how far we get on Friday. Any questions, comments, or queries before we finish for the night?
I have a question. It's very silly.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you deal with when you're modeling that you're going to turn off your phone and the client doesn't get it?
Meaning that the client doesn't necessarily turn their phone off?
Correct.
Yeah.
Notice.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And what I would say is you can kind of be as overt as you possibly can. Just wanted, before we start, just mention that I'm going to be turning off my phone because this meeting is all about you. And actually take a pause, right? Stop talking for a moment while you're watching your phone turn off. That will draw attention to it, and then put the phone back down. I will tell you that 95% of the time, they do not turn theirs off as well. It's a lovely thought that we're going to turn ours off, so they should turn theirs off. Like you're modeling that behavior for them to do it. It just so rarely happens.
Right.
And so I would say be okay with it.
Oh yeah.
Right. I would make a bigger deal about yours, then set it aside, and then cruise forward. Right. As long as you're giving them your full attention. If you're not getting their full attention, it's difficult to control that. Right? Keep asking good questions. One of the ways to continue to get their attention is involving them in the process, right? So the more questions you ask, the more they feel like they have to be paying attention because you're going to expect some answers, the less they're distracted by their phone because they have to pay attention to what's being asked of them. So question asking is another way to keep them engaged and keep them focused. All right, guys, have a lovely evening. Have fun tonight. Enjoy your dinner.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks,
Rick.
See you tomorrow, 9 a.m. See ya.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you. Okay.